Welcome, everyone, to Barclay Damon's Labor and Employment Podcast. This is Rosemary and Enright sitting in Buffalo, New York. I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Sciotti, who's in Syracuse today. How are you doing today, Mike?
Awesome. Another cold, snowy day. I have 4 feet of snow at my house. Wonderful.
Oh, my gosh. Well, it's a good thing. It's perfect for us just to be inside shooting the breeze about this stuff. So all right. So everybody, so it is a continuation of our discussion. I think this is our fourth one, Mike, around employee handbooks. Lots to talk about. So
Yeah.
we were talking about the National Labor Relations Act and the NLRB, so the National Labor Relations Board, and your social media policy. And hand in hand with that goes your code of conduct. And quite frankly, dear listeners, we had so much to talk about in the social media, we didn't get to the code of conduct. So now this particular episode will be all about the code of conduct. So that's why I said it's a continuation of our last episode. But before we jump in, Mike, we've got our question of the day. Question of the day today is, what do you like best about your hometown?
Okay, so I live in Oswego, New York, and we're on the water. So that is what I like the best.
Yeah. And what body of water is that, Mike, up there?
Lake Ontario.
Oh, I'm geographically challenged. I didn't realize that. So it's Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the beauty is you can see the lake effect snow band by looking out my window at my house. It hangs about half a mile offshore. And when it comes onshore, that's when you get the snow.
Wow, I did not realize that. Well, I'm in Buffalo, as I said at the start of the podcast, and we have those snow bands too. So Buffalo, I'm looking out the window at Lake Erie, and it's the same thing. And those snow bands are so cool when they come across. Just love them. But so I think that's a great answer. But I'm going to do a different answer because I could copy you and say Lake Erie. But I think I'm going to go with my beloved Buffalo Bills. I'm a little heartsick over this season and what happened. We won't get into the bad call. All right. It was a catch, everyone. But
it was. I agree.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was a catch. But here we are. So, all right. So with that said, let's jump right in. So, Mike, do you want to set the table again as to why or how, when we're talking about the NLRA and the NLRB in relation to the handbook, in case someone didn't get a chance to listen to the previous podcast?
Yeah, you don't want to be overbroad with your policies. You only want to do what is necessary to protect legitimate business interest. And when you go overbroad, that's when the board has an issue. If you terminate someone based on an illegal policy or an overbroad policy, they're coming after you. If you have in your handbook an illegal policy, they're coming after you if they find out about it. So it's important that you be specific. And the other thing in the code of conduct, Rosemary, I find it impossible to list everything that an employee could possibly do to warrant discipline. So sometimes you approach it less is better. And maybe you have some type of catch-all that says, anything in the sole opinion of management that deserves to be disciplined based on a common sense review of the facts. I've seen employees, I get a call, Johnny is under the conference room table barking like a dog. And I'm like, what? And they actually put the phone in the conference room years ago, and I heard this guy barking. How are you going to put that in the handbook? And don't try to have a code of conduct that goes for pages and pages and pages, because it's probably going to backfire on you. I think less is better, and don't take away common sense from management. And in that case, we told him, get up right now, or we're going to fire you. And he did. And he was about to be disciplined, and he thought he was being funny or somehow protecting himself by acting the way he did. And, he was gone within a few months, but it is stupid. Yeah. So, don't try to dictate everything because you can't possibly.
Exactly. Well, and you know what I would say to that also, a couple of comments, Mike, and that would be if someone, and I agree, I would advise against having it pages and pages and pages. But let's say you ignored us and you did that, and an employer did that, or you already have one that's pages and pages. Where you're going to get in trouble there is you've got pages and pages, and you say, I can't think of an example right now, but let's say you will not steal company property. All right. So, but they steal, somebody comes in and steals my wallet. Well, you didn't say that, but you've specifically said company property, or there's other, different, flavors or variations on something. Now, again, we often will include language that says including this or that, but I will tell you the experience that we have had in particular, and when you have a unionized workforce is, when you sit down and you discipline someone, or if you end up terminating an employee, the union's going to say, and they grieve it, they will sit down and say, well, show us where in your standards of conduct it said this was a violation. How did this employee know? Right? That this, because you've listed all these other things here, but you didn't list that. Why
Yeah.
is it there? Right? And that's the argument they're going to make. And then if your response is, well, because, and I like your thing about common sense, but if you say, well, common sense or some sort of response like that, you're going to get, well, how would that employee know? Because to Mike's point in the previous episode, said you've got employees on the spectrum from here to here, the great employee, the not so great employee, the individual who, maybe has been in the workforce a lot of years, someone who hasn't. I mean, there's people come with all different experiences and all different understandings or lack of understanding. And so you're going to get that argument. So you have to be very careful. As we said, if there's too many pages, that's going to hurt you. Similarly, if you just say, behave yourself, that's not going to be enough either, because there will be a way to argue like this person, how would this person know? And think about, Mike, what I think about in the unionized workforce, for those employers who do not have a union, think about your unemployment, right? You're sitting at the unemployment hearing. How did the employee know? Now, this is the truth. We had an employee who did in fact steal from the company. And I can't remember what it was. It was not money, but maybe it was a laptop, Mike. It was a phone. Who knows what it was? It doesn't matter. But the employee was awarded unemployment. Obviously, we appealed that and we went to a hearing, and the ALJ actually asked the question, how did the employee know they couldn't take that? And they meant it seriously. They said, show us your policy where it says, and how could, and in this particular instance, the employer did not actually have a handbook, and they did not have the standard of conduct. But literally the question was, how did they know? Well, because people should know they don't steal. Guess what? The commissioner's decision was upheld and they got their benefits.
Yeah, and I have one even better than that. ALJ in unemployment said, well, how did the employee know they might lose their job if they didn't show up for work on time?
Right. Exactly.
And I'm like, seriously? So, and that's why in the last podcast we said I look at these from two perspectives. Number one, will the employee get unemployment benefits, and can we justify the termination if we're challenged, like with the Division of Human Rights? I don't worry so much about the unemployment, because the unemployment judges, they come from a very unique background. It better be in writing, and no matter what it is. So, it's a difficult scenario for employers, but as I like to say, we do the best we can. And one of the ways to combat that is in your code of conduct, two parts: expectations and prohibitions. So the expectations, we expect you to show up for work on time every day. We expect you to work while at work. We expect you to work a full shift. We expect you to cooperate with internal company investigations and things like that. You tell employees, this is what we expect of you. And that list is just as important as the prohibitions. And, it sort of says these are the minimum standards that we expect. And, hopefully you don't go overbroad with them. Like, be respectful at all times. Well, I'm not quite sure I know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Can I just say, I love that, Mike. I've never heard it said that way. Expectations and prohibitions. Love it. I mean, I think that is terrific guidance. Terrific. I'm going to steal it now, Mike, and use
I'm
it.
sure I stole it from someone, but I don't
Yeah,
remember who.
that's great. But yeah, I love that. So you've got your expectations, and and the other thing I would say is, in those expectations, I mean, it'll sound silly, but includes an expectation. We expect you to comply with the policies in this handbook.
Yeah.
I mean, and kind of that catch-all at the bottom. So, but
Yeah.
yes, that's what
Yeah.
other.
And,
Go ahead.
and then the prohibitions are just as important, but I think you need to really sit down, and I say vet your handbook before it's published, or maybe vet parts of it. So maybe show it to some supervisors who have to implement it. Maybe show it to some workers who you trust and will give you an honest opinion. Do you understand everything in here? And make sure, you may think in HR, oh, it's perfect. But then it gets out there and you have to implement it, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? And so I vet these things, and it's not going to take long. Just, give it a week, and people will get back to you with their honest assessment. But, once you get past the expectations, what do you not want employees to do at work? No fighting. Okay, that makes some sense. We're going to get
No
into
gambling. That's in there.
no gambling, no bringing into work cannabis, controlled substance, alcohol. And in the cannabis one, but believe it or not, I have like 10 or 12 items that I tell employers think about putting in there. Let me just give you a feel for some of them.
Well, you
Obviously,
should tell them all of them. If you're go ahead. I think you should
yeah.
share, please.
So don't come to work impaired. That's, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be sickness. So I'm so sick, I'm not able to safely perform the essential functions of my job. I'm not going to discipline you. I'm just saying, tell us if you're sick. It's okay. I don't want you doing anything unsafe. But with the cannabis, and this goes with alcohol and controlled substance, don't come under the influence. Don't bring it on company property. Don't try to sell it or
Mhm.
barter it while at work. Don't use it while at work. Also, I put in there, don't use, because now with Wi-Fi, don't use company computer or our Wi-Fi to order cannabis or
Mm.
alcohol or controlled substances. And you're like, well, wait a minute, on the internet? Oh, yeah, on the internet. I can send you links to all these wonderful, I call them, I think, semi illegal sites where you can order all sorts of stuff. You know,
Wow. I didn't
yeah,
know
it's,
that,
it's,
Mike.
oh, yeah, there's, my favorite is, it's hand in hand with this, with people that we always tell employers, confirm the degree the employee says they have directly with the university. There's a website out there, and go ahead and Google it, cheaperthantuition.com. And if you go to cheaperthantuition.com, you can order a Harvard law degree. They'll give you a transcript. They're going to ask you what year you graduated and what courses you took. You get to sort of tailor it, and it looks real. And
Wow.
oh yeah, it's wonderful. There there are websites out there, Rosemary, for fake driver's license, and they program that little metal strip on the back. So if someone scans it, it works. So,
Really?
oh, it's amazing. There are fake. You can get fake Social Security cards. It is, when I started looking into this years ago, I was just like, oh my God, this is crazy,
Wow.
what people can do. But I like limiting the use of our internet or our company for business purposes only. You got to be careful, though. I'd like to be specific. Don't use it to order drugs or alcohol. My guess is people are using your system for personal reasons that aren't illegal, like and you don't want to have a policy that's over broad. Other things that we see on the cannabis that I like calling out is no drug paraphernalia at work. So some people, I put that one in there when someone brought a bong into the workplace and put it on their desk. They weren't using it, but it sends the wrong message. Mm-hmm. Do not bring in drug magazines. There is a whole cottage industry now, High Times, Vegas Cannabis. There's an example I use where Mike Tyson's on the cover smoking a joint. Ban those things from the workplace. So you just want to sort of think it through and, take a look at your mandatory sexual harassment policy. And you can come up with, don't violate the policy, but you can come up with things that, do. And, don't order these things, don't bring them into work. Mm-hmm. And the workplace sort of dictates what is acceptable. And here's the example I always like to use because we're on a spectrum. Our law office is on the high end of what is expected of its workers. I would call it a professional organization, and you have professionals like hospitals and CPA firms and the highly educated workforces that do high level stuff, engineering firms, things like that. And then you have this example, and this is the example I always give when I do sexual harassment training. The woman cashier is surrounded by pornography. And then everyone's like, I give a lot of examples and everyone's like shocked. And then I start laughing. I said, she works at a porn shop. That is the workplace. And that sort of dictates what is acceptable and what is not. Mm-hmm. And I think when you draft your code of conduct, you need to realize that. Yeah. Where do you fall on that spectrum? If you're a bar with 20 employees, there's a difference between Tully's and a dive bar. Tully's is going to hold their people to higher standards. The dive bar, maybe people are swearing and who knows. But you always have to, when you do this, your code of conduct, don't steal, from like IBM or something, their code of conduct. Because does it work in your workplace? Does it make any sense whatsoever? Mm-hmm. The prohibitions that you're putting on the employees. And I really want you to think it through. So let me pause there, see if you want to say anything or have questions.
Well, no, I had asked you all that because I was curious to hear about the cannabis. So I think that's great. That was very helpful. Excuse me. So what I wanted to talk about also, Mike, so we're talking about the prohibitions, and we've said it a couple of times that the whole don't be disrespectful and that's overly broad. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, wait a second. We don't want people to be disrespectful to each other or to their supervisor. Yep. And the reason it's too broad. All right. So again, we talked about this in episode 5. The NLRB looks at this through a very different lens. All right. And so their position is that, for example, if an individual is being disciplined, and I can't remember the exact words in the decision, Mike, you might remember it, but an individual who's being disciplined may blurt something out during the meeting. And often, how many times have we said during a meeting that someone might use an expletive toward their supervisor, or the person administering the discipline? And we say, you know what? You're fired. You're out. All right. The days of doing that are gone because the NLRB has taken the position that the employee or the worker is in an emotional situation. They have no control over the situation, and that they may have an emotional outburst. And as such, they should not be disciplined, because you have a manager or a supervisor who's saying to them, I am disciplining you, or I may be terminating you. And that person may react. That would be disrespectful, all right, using an expletive like that. But the NLRB takes the position, well, in that particular instance, it's not. You want to go ahead, Mike. I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
comment on that.
I think, and let's be honest, supervisors also swear.
Yeah,
Owners
that's right.
also swear. So there's a little bit of cursing that is overlooked at work. It is, I don't want to say accepted, but
Right,
tolerated.
right.
And you need to sort of be consistent. So let me change your facts a little bit. Johnny says to the supervisor, "You're a dumbass," or just
Yeah,
that's all he does.
yeah.
I'm letting him walk on that.
I
But then
agree.
he threatens you. Then he throws something. Then he pushes all the stuff off your desk, makes some other, the threat outburst. I think that's enough.
Yeah.
And
Text, Mike. You're talking about context here.
yeah, yeah. Context matters. You could. I just did supervisor training yesterday, and I told a group of supervisors, you cannot discipline all day long. You got work to do. My guess is you could. They're all shaking their head. They're like, yeah. And you have to sort of be selective, but consistent nonetheless.
Mhm.
So, you know, don't be Mickey Mouse stuff. It's going to happen. But consistency, context, all these things make a difference. And to the extent you have any doubt whatsoever, you know, you can, if you're not sure it's okay to terminate, do this. You're suspended with pay, go home for the rest of the day. Take those few hours to get, consult with
Mhm.
HR, consult with legal counsel. Can we terminate in this scenario?
Yeah.
And if we say you can't, you've held the employee harmless because he was
Mhm.
paid for the rest of the day. And if you can terminate, it costs you a few bucks. Okay, but you got peace of mind
Yeah.
relative to it.
Yeah.
You remember you don't have to terminate on the spot. You can think about it. And many
You
employers think,
should. And you
I
should.
have to do it. No, you don't. You think about it. And, I'm not saying for a long time, like a day, make sure you get your ducks in a row and you honestly assess, should we fire this person for this conduct?
Right.
And, then
Yeah.
you make your decision and you live with it. And one of the other things, when you do discipline and stick with your decision, don't be wishy washy. You're in charge. If you made a mistake, it's going to come out at some point, but management expectations, go with it. But
Yeah.
do it smartly. Get some good advice before you make the determination. Like my rule of thumb, I tell every employer, if you're going to terminate for something on social media, you're going to run it by me first. Otherwise, you are proceeding with a huge risk,
Mhm.
because I want to know what other employees commented. Did other employees do a thumb up or some other stupid emoji that they can do? I want to know those things.
Mhm.
And sometimes they look at me like, well, why? It goes back to what we talked about last time, protected and concerted activity.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to analyze what was said and figure out, if the employer is set on termination, we have to give good advice. Is this defensible? And,
Yeah.
you just take that time. Don't rush the termination. He's going to be there tomorrow. And the other thing, and it's sort of a side note, if someone was violent or throwing stuff, don't ever be afraid to call law enforcement. They are your friend in this area. And, yeah, someone might get arrested. I don't care. If someone's acting out in the workplace, throwing stuff, threatening people, call the cops. And they'll come pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to just follow up when we were talking about the disrespectful, and you said that Johnny says to his supervisor, "You're a dumbass," and walks away. I do have to tell you, I've got a client, and it's a unionized workforce, and the employee did in fact swear, and client was gonna end employment because of that. And one of the questions or comments that the union made, because they grieved it, was, well, the supervisor has sworn on this occasion, this occasion, this occasion. They went and verified it, and sure enough, just like you said, we're like, okay, well, we'll be rolling back that action. So
Yeah. And
you
yeah, and let's be honest, to everyone listening out there, every workforce is not prim and proper
no,
24/7. It simply is not possible. And you just have to use common sense, get that confirmation before you actually terminate. That being said, I'm not saying run everything by Labor and Employment Council. Someone takes a swing at someone. All right, they're done.
yeah,
That's not protected activity. Someone transmit pornography from one employee to another. There's nothing to discuss. It's going to be termination unless you're working in a porn shop. But other than that,
yeah.
what are you going
The
to do?
prohibition, yeah, exactly. So I brought up that prohibition because, again, we're talking about code of conduct, expectations, and prohibitions. So, and we were focusing on some of the ones that are, vague. So we had talked about this disrespect. The other one, Mike, that I think is important is, well, two of them: insubordination, right? Because I think, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, I think that is an interesting one, because you may have an employee who is pushing back because they believe the conditions under which, for example, they are working are unsafe. They feel it is unsafe, or they were entitled to their break and they didn't get their break. And I'll have an employer call me and say, we needed them to do this, or it's safe and they're wrong, and so I'm going to discipline them, or because they're being insubordinate. All right. So my answer to that is, again, everything we've talked about. Let's look at context, all of that. But the NLRB, and when you see insubordination, they're going to say too broad. All right. And I want to hear your opinion on this, Mike. So, so then someone will say, well, how do we do that then? Well, you've got all of these policies, and in your expectations, you're going to say you will not disrupt the workforce. You will, what's the verb I want? You will reasonably given instructions, and those types of
Yeah.
things, all those expectations. So if you are given a reasonable instruction, and that's an expectation, and you fail to do so, then you as the employer can take action. So that's, to me, how you get to the insubordination. It's through these other policies. It's through the expectations section of the code of conduct. I always worry a little bit, Mike, about that, just saying insubordination. Your thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly. The safety issue comes up all the time.
Yep.
You need to remember New York has multiple whistleblower statutes on the books, one for everyone and then one for healthcare. We have retaliation provisions buried in the labor law. We have OSHA and the OSHA whistleblower. And then, there are unique industries. The mine industry has their own whistleblower provision. There's lots of them out there. The first thing I always tell employers is make sure you're right, that it is a safe condition, because the employee doesn't have to prove it was an unsafe condition. They have to simply show that they believed and had a good faith basis for believing that it was unsafe and illegal. They don't need it to be actually illegal. And so we have to be careful with the whistleblower laws, with OSHA, and make sure you are doing everything correctly. We are met with many times the employee saying, I'm going to OSHA. I just had this happen the other day. He gave a detailed complaint. I was retained to investigate his complaint, but it was detailed in the extent of the allegation, but not detailed with specifics, facts, like what day and who was present and things like this. The employee was ultimately terminated because he refused to cooperate with me. And he was trying to use sick leave and safe leave because he thought the workplace wasn't safe. And the employer informed him that's not an appropriate use. And he refused to come to work. But we found out through the grapevine he was moving out of state. And that's all that was going on. He was
Okay.
trying to drain his sick time bank.
Got
But,
it.
make sure you are correct. And sometimes if you are, meaning you run a safe workforce, they're accusing you of being unsafe. I told the HR director, and they were convinced. I said, give the guy OSHA's phone number. And the guy, they did. And the guy was taken aback. He was like, here, go ahead, call OSHA if you think. He did. OSHA came out. And guess what? Passed with flying colors. So, I mean, sometimes I don't recommend that in every circumstance, but in this one, it worked. And it worked to
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
advantage. But remember, their standard is not an actual violation or an actual safety risk. It's a reasonable belief,
Yeah.
which is a plaintiff's attorney's dream. Make sure you button it up, that you confirm everything, especially if it's a safety issue or something unsafe, photos, videos,
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to interrupt you there, Mike, just in
yeah.
the interest of time, because I just want to say, I think that would be a great episode for us to go through OSHA. We'll do that for all of you. So listeners, so hang tight on that, because I think that's great, everything he's talking about. And that came up in the context of that insubordination, just saying insubordination in your prohibitions. I wouldn't do that. I'd get at it through other things, but it comes up a lot around safety. And then very quickly, Mike, the other thing in terms of prohibitions, again, putting on the hat of we could end up with an unfair labor practice would be, a lot of times employers will have a prohibition that you cannot leave your workstation, right? You can't leave your workstation without permission. So again, got to be careful there. What's the context, right? Because if there's if the employee has a reasonable belief there's an unsafe work condition, or what you sometimes get into, and we don't have time now in this episode to go into details around it, but there are things around, union, and, if there's they walk off the job for some reason, all right, or there's a strike or something like that. And so it's more complicated than that, and we don't have the time here, but I just wanted to point that out, that I'm always careful with saying that an employee, one of the prohibitions is cannot leave your workstation without permission. So I don't know, Mike, if you want to put a finer point or anything on
Yeah,
that.
just briefly. I mean, context,
Yeah.
context, context,
Yeah.
because the leaving could cause an unsafe work condition. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe it's an assembly line and they have like 4 breaks throughout the day. Otherwise, you have to get approval from the supervisor because someone has to be in this slot.
Right.
So context really makes a huge difference in that scenario. I think that's how you have to evaluate it. What do you go to? And then let's say I'm at a desk. What are you going to do? Chain me to my desk and
Right.
tell me I can't go to the restroom? There's other ways to combat the restroom issue. One of my clients put in place a policy. You cannot bring your cell phone into the bathroom and leave it at your desk. Boy, that cut down on long bathroom breaks that people were taking, and he meant it. He told them because he knew what was going on, and
Yeah.
I said, well, let's come up with something else. But don't stop people from going to the restroom. Don't stop them from getting water. Remember, you have in your expectation list work while at work. That's not all 8 hours. I got news for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's more like 7,
Yeah.
and they're chit chatting. Everyone does it. So use some common sense, and context matters.
Yep. Perfect. All right, gang. Well, so sorry. I think we went a little long on this one, but there's so much to talk about with this stuff. But so we'll end here. Thank you all for joining us again. As I always say, look for us out on Spotify and others. And again, my producer will kill us, or our producer will kill us for not listing them all. I promise, Kyla, from here on out, we'll list them all. Seriously, for those of you listening, you've got questions, you've got comments, topics you want us to talk about, please let us know. We're happy to talk about it. And thanks as always, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And everyone out there, realize we have a lot to say. And we know we try to keep these short, but you wind me up. I just start talking. So, just stay tuned. We'll give you lots of these.
All right. Thanks. The Labor and Employment Podcast is available on barclaydamon.com, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. Be sure to like, follow, and stay connected for future episodes.